Thank you very much, Ms. Finlay. My cabinet colleagues, Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Mr. Randall Mitchell, Member of Parliament for the area, the Minister of Health, Mr. Terence Dayal Singh, the Chairman of the Tunapuna, the Chairman of Sawa Laventil Corporation. We are in St. Joseph, so we are in Sawa Laventil Corporation, Mr. Anthony Roberts, Chairman of the HDC and members of the Board of the HDC, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Housing, Father Cornelius Phillip, Executive Chairman of the contractor who will build this structure for us, Mr. Emil Elias, Chairman of NHIC, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. This is one of the happy occasions I always look forward to when I come out like this, as I have done recently in Arima, where we turned the sod for housing development with a strange name, a place called The River Runs Through It. Today there's no river running through St. Joseph, but I'm sure there's optimism running through a number of people around this area who believe that with a 10% chance, they might get one of these units. 1,000 applicants already who qualify for 160 units, but at least they do have a chance as long as units are being built. But one of the things we have to understand as public policy is that the government cannot and really should not undertake to build a house for every person who needs one. But everyone needs a place to call home and a place to have a shelter over your head. What the government of Trinidad and Tobago, a PNM government, is trying to do is to stay true to our long-standing fundamental philosophy in public policy. And that is that there is a significant role for the government to play with respect to expanding the housing stock. There are a number of models which a person could pursue to put that roof over your head. But in Trinidad and Tobago, given our history, our geography, and all other things, our economic circumstances, it has been the government of Trinidad and Tobago through public policy that has had the single largest effect on growing and expanding the housing stock in Trinidad and Tobago. I must say that the success of that policy in increasing and making the housing stock available has in itself driven the process and has driven more people towards the government. Because when it appears as though no units are being built and the government would have withdrawn from that policy, the number of applicants decline. But once people see that the program is underway and units are being built and others are able to find that elusive dream of an affordable unit, they move towards the government's program. So when I moved in as Minister of Housing in 2004, November, the first thing I tried to find out was how many people were looking to the program for their solution to their problem in the chronic housing shortage. And at that time, I was told that the number of applicants, even though it was a pretty, Ms. Simone will tell you the database was not very clean, and there were a little bit of issues with it. But the figure we were looking at then was 30 to 40,000 people. And by the time I left that ministry in 2007, November, even though we had built and had made available a number of thousands of houses, the number of applicants had risen to 70,000. And then later on, I heard other ministers of housing saying that the number had been in the order of 100,000 as the applications grew. And now I'm hearing this minister saying 116,000. Like, well, even if half of that is right, it means that there are 80,000 households looking to the public sector housing program for the solution. When you look in the newspapers, as I do from time to time, trying to understand what's going on in the country, you could hardly find housing units available for sale in what I consider to be an affordable way. If there's a housing unit of any quality available anywhere, it costs $1 million. And when you look at the average income of the average household in Trinidad and Tobago, $1 million unit is well beyond what can realistically be expected to be available. And of course, as the government enters the program, the phrase low-cost housing recedes into the background. Because there was a time when low-cost housing meant just that, housing being available at low cost. But given the growth of the economy, and given what the expectation is, not just a starter house, but an occupiable house, we're not really aiming at low-cost housing, because then we'll have difficulty delivering that kind of unit. We're looking at low-income housing, where low income means those houses that are pitched in their cost and good enough quality so that they could satisfy the needs for those persons whose income should fall within the qualification range that the government has established as persons who should get priority to benefit from what in effect is a heavily subsidized program. As I mentioned early on, the government's involvement in housing in the nation over the decades has been at a tremendous cost to the taxpayer. But we shouldn't complain too much about that, because the argument that these units should become more available at market cost might make sense economically. But when one sees the need and what their costs are, and you justify the existence of the government and the program, one has to go a little further on and say that because the government is in receipt of revenues that really belong to the people, one of the best things the government could do with the people's revenue is to try to provide the people with one of the most fundamental basic needs, and that is housing. But every person who gets access to a house that was constructed under this public program must accept that they did get a huge assistance from the state, because all these houses, apartments or individual units, come to you with the government absorbing a significant part of the construction cost and the government applying very minimal charges to the land that goes into the project. And with that, you must understand that when a house is made available to a low-income earner at $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, or a rental of a few hundred or a couple $1,000s a month, that is not the economic cost of that unit. There is a significant subsidy which the government did not pass on to you. And if you ever get lucky and get one of these units, never you get up and tell anybody that this state, this nation has done nothing for you and your family. Because with respect to a person's expenditure in life, a house is probably, and the economists will tell you it is, the single largest expense of any family, any average family in any country. And if the government does that, the state does that for you to assist you with significant subsidy, the least we can say to you is to pay your part of the bargain. If you are in a rental unit, then for heaven's sake, pay the rent. And if you take a mortgage, then for heaven's sake, give your mortgage priority over fitting and other minor activities. Because this is significant. We have now come to a situation where, with the best will in the world, the state does not have the revenue stream to continue to put money into the program, to sustain it at a level where it would be a significant response to the number of applicants. When I was Minister of Housing, the program was running about approximately $2 billion a year, which the Treasury could have supported either directly or through support of bonds. Now, the revenue stream has dried up considerably, and there isn't the cash to come from the Treasury, And the Minister of Finance does not have the wherewithal to raise the fund from state borrowing, because that will push the national debt up too much. So we have had to look for other ideas. And this is what this particular project is about, the public-private partnership. It is public in that it is public land, it is public policy, it's being run by a public agency, but the contractor, a private entity, the contractor will raise the funding and use the contractor's wherewithal to create the units. And because there are people out there who have the wherewithal to take a mortgage or to pay a rent or to go on a rent-to-own program, their revenue stream will eventually pay for this project and allow us, by managing time and using a new idea, do what otherwise would not have been done. And that is why this project is so significant. It would have been easy to do, as has happened before, take the position and say, well, we are in the throes of some economic decline, and therefore the government doesn't have the money to build houses, so therefore no house building should take place, or would take place. But that would mean that we are not setting out to solve a fundamental problem which needs to be solved. But we do know that there's a lot of money in this country, because significant money is coming to this country through the government, and it gets out into the private sector. And a number of private sector entities have the ability to borrow if they don't already have the money in their bank account. But they have the ability to borrow. And their borrowing will not go on the public debt profile. So we've come up with the private-public partnership, which is going to allow those who can raise the funding to do so, and trust that the government agency will work with them, enter into contractual arrangements, and keep their side of the bargain. And their side of the bargain is, if you, the contractor, raise the funding, and we mean competitive funding, you perform well, you build within cost and within time, as we expect NH will do. Once you've built those units, you would have kept your side of the bargain. The private sector would have kept their side of the bargain. And the government, through its agencies, whether it is HDC and or Home Mortgage Bank or TTMF or FCB or any other agency, once the units are ready for occupancy, the HDC in the intervening construction period should have selected and have willing and ready and waiting those eager occupants who would go into those units, take the responsibility for paying for them as they own them, or for paying for the rent, which will bring back some portion of the income. And that will allow the program to be funded either in part or in whole, and we would have got done what the original objective was. Because the original objective is to build housing units, expand the housing base, and allow persons to get a roof over their heads, and to do so in a way that all of us will be proud of what will go up here. And this, I am happy to know, is the first actual exercise that is coming to fruition. Before, when I spoke in Arima a few months ago, we were talking about the idea. I spoke about it in the Parliament, and so did the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Housing. So this contractor is on trial. Would it work? Can it work? Well, we'll wait and see. But I have confidence that it will work. And if it does work, it will be a beacon to other contractors who can do the same thing, so we can get more of these projects, and we may very well find that we might be doing a lot better in this public-private partnership program than when we were doing it only with the HDC. Because there was a time when the HDC had its own construction crews. There were builders building and painting and doing whatever for the HDC. And then that eventually ground to a level of inefficiency, where the HDC then moved away from having its own labor force, with all that went with that, to hiring contractors to do the building for the HDC. We are now moving away from that in some respect by having the private sector commit itself to the funding. One of the things I don't want to hear about, and I expect not to hear about in this arrangement of public-private partnership, is the contractor saying, well, we have cost overruns, and we have delays, and we have this, and we have that, for which you are liable. I trust that the contract would have been written so tightly that the contractor is stuck to deliver what he expects to deliver at the price that he committed to deliver. And if we do get rid of that, we would have removed a tremendous bugbear from the whole question of how cost-effective the program is and what were the excesses and the abuses that took place in previous arrangements. So out of evil may come good. The economic decline that forced us into this situation may give us a solution that would give us more efficient construction of public sector housing. This location in the corridor is making use of open space that is finally being put for housing where the infrastructure already exists. And I draw your attention to the city of Port of Spain, which I am told has 37,000 residents. I was not aware that the number of residents within the confines of the city of Port of Spain was 37,000. You know, service as from a residential standpoint, 37,000 people. It means that Port of Spain has lost its way as the capital city of this country, and the infrastructure on a different face because we would have maximized our potential. I will keep my eye on this project, as I'm sure the minister will, hoping that it becomes a standard-bearing project, a landmark project in the HTC program. A while ago, mention was made of East Grove. I don't know how many of you know the East Grove development in Curep, but when I became Minister of Housing, East Grove was a bit of open land which probably produced 3 bunches of banana, 2 pumpkin and a cucumber, and it was called farming, and that was how that area was utilized. But of course, it is now one of the finest housing areas in the corridor built by the Housing Development Corporation. And I have no doubt that this area will develop in a similar way, and I have every confidence that the HTC staff and the board will do what we expect them to do, which is to do more with less. So this afternoon, permit me to identify the chairman, Mr. Newman George, who is personally held responsible for this program, because he came just with a smile on his face. He is one of those from the private sector who know that the private sector could do better than the government. He was at home construction. You all know about home construction and their record and ability to build houses. He is now running the HTC. So this is a test as to whether the private sector can do better than the public sector. And I'll be back here, God willing, when this project is finished, to see whether that test has been passed or whether, in fact, that was just so much old talk that the private sector is better at building houses than the public sector. And I also would like to recognize, I see her in the, and I must recognize this, even I'm not sure in what capacity she's here. Ms. Ingrid, hello, hello. Thanks for being here, because your presence here gives me confidence that I'm in the right place. Because I'm sure that those agencies that are responsible for funding the takeout are as important in this program as the contractor who would build. And now, as we're about to turn this on, we would have made significant progress. And I simply want to say to you all, it is not in difficult times that we should despair. It's in difficult times that the best of us sometimes come out. And I expect that the best of the HDC and the contractors and all those associated with the National Housing Program will demonstrate that we are tough people, and tough people do best under difficult situations. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the progress on this site.